Welcome to a new video. Today we're going to take a look at the first of the 3 archetypes from Amazing Defenders Rescue Ace. That's right, I want to go to start to take a look at Amazing Defenders, the new set that is coming out at the end of January for, the TCG. This particular set is not the strongest of sets where it comes to deck building packs, but it's still a very exciting set, at least for me, and specifically in the case of Rescue Ace, because I'm going to say this, I always wanted to be a firefighter when I was a kid, and this is the closest thing that I can actually get to do that while also just playing a game, and that's why I love Rescue Ace so much. Even though they're not the strongest of archetypes, I still absolutely love them. But before we jump right into the video itself and do my own analysis, I'm going to ask you that if you want to see more videos like this, kindly of course, if you want to see more, I would highly appreciate it if you consider subscribing to the channel. Give a like to the video if you enjoyed it, and of course, let me know in the comments down below what do you think about the archetype, what points that I missed, as well just, making it into a little bit of a discussion, because this particular archetype is an archetype that I'm very, very interested in seeing what people think. But that's out of the way. Now we can actually talk about, the archetypes as an overall. So the first thing we need to understand about Rescue Ace is that Rescue Ace is basically divided into 2 categories. We have the Fire Warriors, which are 3 monsters out of the 7 monsters that we have, and we have the 4 Fire Machines. Now, the Fire Warriors have their own kind of like hand trappy kind of effect, which we'll talk about when we get to it, which is pretty cool. And then we also have the kind of main monster of the archetype being Rescue Ace Hydrant. Again, we'll talk about that one in a second. But this is kind of like the card that most things are based around, although not as bad as a what is it called, a super quantum field spell, for example, Magna Carrier, that is like, it's really pivotal that you see it. It's very good that you see Hydrant, but it's not the most pivotal thing in the world. It's just making your plays a little bit better. But in the case of the thing that Rescue Ace do is that they do kind of things when your opponent special summon or activate monster effects on the field, or do some particular things. They essentially react on top of what your opponent do, which is pretty cool. On top of that, they also have their big boss monster that just set for and pass, which is very, very stupid. So that's also kind of the thing they do, and they basically work with quick play spells and traps to essentially kind of assert dominance, and it's a very field-based deck. So that is kind of what the deck do, and now we can actually jump into what the cards do by themselves, because I think I kind of explained as a baseline what to do, but now let's talk about the cards themselves. So the first card I'm actually going to talk about is of course the Hydrant that I mentioned before. Very, very important card for the archetype, but not like as pivotal like I mentioned before as like the most important thing to see. Also very easy to see because you have some options to see this card, being a level 1, being a machine. Like there are a lot of like small ways to see this card that making it very, very easy to see in your hand or special summon it to your field, so you shouldn't worry about this card that much. But what did this card do? Well, first and foremost, it's the searcher for your monsters. During the main phase, of course, you're able to add any Rescue Ace monster except another copy of itself. The other thing that this card does is that as a once per turn, you are able to activate a quick play spell or a trap that was set this turn by your Rescue Ace card effects. So let's say, for example, I set a trap and by a Rescue Ace effect, and that trap is just really pivotal for the moment. I will be able to activate it during this turn because of this card being on the field. The last effect is that this card is protected if you control another Rescue Ace monster except another copy of itself. That is protected from targeting from attacks and targeting by card effects, which making this card a little bit more harder to kill and essentially able to stay on the field. Like I mentioned, some of your cards are getting stronger when you have this card on your field. So that's why this is a really good card. I'm going to give this card 5 stars because it is very important. It's not, like I mentioned, the most important thing in the world, and it's also a searcher for your monsters, so that's pretty good, but it's still a very, very important card. As for the next set of monsters I want to talk about, I'm going to talk about Impulse, Air Hoister, and Intruder, which are the Fire Warrior monsters. Like I mentioned before, they're all mini hand trap kind of cards that you're able to tribute them from the hand or field if your opponent basically kind of just activate the monster effect on the field. And they're all able to tribute themselves, like I mentioned, from the hand or field to activate this effect. In the case of Impulse, it's able to special summon any Rescue Ace machine monster from your deck. In the case of Air Hoister, special summon any Rescue Ace and accept another copy of itself from the hand. In the case of Intruder, the same thing, but from the graveyard, except from summoning another copy of itself. But In the case of what they do as individual, for their own individual effects, we have the effect of Air Hoister, which is a searcher for your spells. We have Intruder, which is a searcher for your traps. And of course, we have the effect of Impulse being by itself, which is kind of like a mini negation effect. I don't know, it's kind of like a weird thing. I think it should have been your monster searcher and then your Hydrant should have done something else. But the point is that it's able to basically, not as a quick effect, but as an own effect, to choose one effect monster your opponent controls with the highest attack and your choice if tied, and neither player can activate that monster effect. So it's kind of like a weird kind of interruption effect, or should I say kind of like basically opening up the way for you if there is kind of like a weird floodgatey monster that you're able to just summon this and just use this effect. It's kind of an interesting effect. It's not the best thing in the world, but it's still really good. In the case of their own, star ratings, Air Hoister getting a 4 and the other two getting a 3. They're still very, very good, but I think the special summoning effect, as much as it's really, really looking strong, it's not as strong as you might think it is, so that's why they're only getting a 3 and this one getting a 4, because it's a searcher for spells, so it's a little bit better than Intruder, which is a searcher for trap, and special summoning out of the hand is still very, very good. Now talking about the fire machines, we're going to talk about first about Fire Attacker and Fire Engine. These two particular cards kind of goes almost the same way. Fire Attacker and Fire Engine has the same effect that if a Rescue Ace monster except another copy of it themselves is normal or special summon, you're able to special summon them out of the hand. In the case of Fire Attacker individual effect, if a card is added to your opponent's hand except by drawing it, you're able to draw 2 and discard 1. In the case of Fire Engine, if a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field except actually not accept anything. If a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, you're able to special summon 1 level 4 or lower Rescue Ace monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. These two particular cards, again, very, very good for swarming, but they're kind of depending on your opponent. I'm going to give both of them 3 stars. They're still very, very good, but they're not like the best thing in the world. There are special summoners, so at least they have that going for them. But drawing 2 and discarding 1 is good, but it's not always a thing that your opponent will do before they essentially negate your monster effect. So that's why being reacted as an archetype is very, very good, but it's not the best thing in the world. And then the last monster I want to talk about, of course, is the last monster of the archetype, is the big boss monster itself. It's Turbulence. This particular card is very, very easy to summon. You just have to banish 2 Rescue Ace monsters from your graveyard, and then you special summon this card from your hand, or should I say Rescue Ace cards, not monsters. And then during the main phase, you're able to set up to 4 Rescue Ace quick play spells or normal traps with different names directly from your deck, which is absolutely insane. It's a +4 on 1 card. And of course, if another card you control leaves the field by an opponent card effect, it's also going to have the effect that it's kind of like a mini protection effect that it's just, or should I say reaction effect, destroy a card your opponent controls. So yeah, it's very, very stupid, and essentially just being a very strong card. I'm going to give this card 4 stars. It's just 4 stars for setting 4 and being a very, very easy monster to just special summon out of your hand, being a very, very good boss monster as well. 3,000 to 3,000 is nothing to laugh at. But yeah, that does it for the monsters themselves. Now we actually can talk about the spells. And for the spells, we have, first off, the field spell, which we're going to talk about it by itself, and that is Rescue Ace Headquarters. This particular card has 3 particular effects, but it's only going to get 2 stars out of me, because as much as it has 3 effects that looks very impressive, it's not a card that you run more than 1, because of the fact that, like, yes, it's giving you an additional normal summon, but unfortunately this archetype, if it doesn't really get the right cards, you don't really get the benefit of an additional normal summon. It's kind of like a weird thing to explain, but it's just really good, but also not really the best. It's kind of really, really weird. It's definitely a card that you want to play as a one-off, but not more than that. Also, it does have the additional recurring effect, which is actually pretty good, that once per turn you can target 4 of your Rescue Ace cards that are banished or in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck, so your Turbulence can activate its effect once more, basically during the main phase, as another main phase, or if you special summon it again during a later turn for you, so that's actually pretty cool. And also, if your opponent controls a monster and your Rescue Ace monsters gain for additional 500 attack and defense, giving them additional more protection from battle, so again, pretty cool. But the main cards that you actually want to focus about is the Rescue Ace quick play spells and traps, and then we have rescue, alert, contain, and extinguish. These 4 particular cards are the ones that you're going to get from Amazing Defenders. There's another one that we're going to talk about a little bit later, but these all are treated as rescue ace cards, and they all are very, very nice. They are better if you have Hydrant, but they can work by themselves. So as for their own cards, we have first off rescue, being able to target a rescue ace monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Or should I say, sorry, special summon it, and if you control a Hydrant, you're able to target a rescue monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it instead to your side of the field. In the case of alert, this is the one that add back from your graveyard to your hand, or if you control a Hydrant, you can add 1 monster from your deck instead. And then we have the 2 traps, which contain, if you control a rescue ace monster, target an effect monster your opponent control this turn, that effect monster cannot attack, its effect are negated, and if you control a Hydrant, it can also not be used for fusion, synchro, or exceeds or link summoning. And in the case of extinguish, it's basically destroy a card if you control a rescue ace monster, and if you control a Hydrant, it's not your opponent cannot activate that monster effect or card with that name for the rest of the turn. So that's kind of what it does. So all of these 4 cards are really good, and they're just very decent cards as 4 baselines options for your, turbulence to set to your side of the field. I would give the traps 4 stars. If you control any rescue ace monsters, they're just good. They're interruptions, but the spells will get the 3 because the spells, while they are good, they do have their own problem in the case of the fact that they are a little bit more dependent of Hydrant to being good. Otherwise, they would just work with a graveyard. A Monster Reborn is not bad. I'm not saying it's bad, and I'm not saying adding a card from graveyard to your hand is bad, because sometimes it can actually save you a particular resource or anything or something. But being able to search and being able to maybe take a monster from your opponent graveyard is a little bit better. So that's where they're getting a 3, but they're still very, very good cards. If you control a Hydrant, your quick play spell Monster Reborn is basically an interruption by itself, or should say kind of, disruption, because you're able to maybe target something very important for your opponent, so that's why this card is really good. But that does it for the support from Amazing Defenders, and there is one particular other card that I actually want to talk about, and that is the last card from, that we got from Cyberstorm or Cyberworld Access. I forget the name, the last set of Master Rule 5, I guess, before we'll see what will be Master Rule 6. And the card that we got is a card called Reinforce. Again, another card that is always treated as a rescue ace card, and this particular card doesn't require Hydrant, but it has its own individual gimmick. This particular card allowing you to target any rescue ace monster you control until the end of the turn is gain fire on attack and defense, and it's unaffected by your opponent's monster effects. Also, the next time it will be destroyed by battle, it is not destroyed, and the other effect is that you are able to banish this card from the graveyard and target 1 rescue ace spell in your graveyard, set it to your field. You can only use the effect of Reinforce once per turn. This particular card is actually very, very good, but I'm only going to give it a 3 because of one particular thing. It's able to protect your Hydrant from monster effects if you have it, and it's another card that actually works with Hydrant, because Hydrant says that a card that once per turn it can actually activate a quick play spell or a trap that was set by a rescue ace card effect to your side of the field. So let's say you have Reinforce as one of your cards and you already use your let's say, I don't know, your other cards, and let's say you have a rescue in your graveyard that you haven't used. You have this, it can basically afterwards you banish it, and then you can basically set, for example, rescue and then activate the rescue immediately. I would not say that this card is absolutely amazing, but it's still really, really good, and I do think it's actually kind of cool. But yeah, that does it for the Rescue Ace cards as an overall. We only got like 13 of them. Unfortunately, Rescue Ace didn't get the second card, unlike the Meccano and Purify archetypes. Unfortunately, we only got 1 additional new card. I wish they gave us a second one, because I do think the archetype deserved that as well. But it's still a very, very cool archetype as an overall. So now let's jump into the strengths and weaknesses of the archetype. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of the Rescue Ace archetype? Well, the first thing I would say that is a very, very good advantage for this archetype, or should I say a strength, is that it's very, very board based. It's an archetype that is able to kind of accumulate advantage really, really quickly. It's able to special summon cards out of its hand really, really quickly. It's able to activate its effect in reaction to your opponent, which is just really easy to do sometimes, because if your opponent activates, like for example, an effect of a monster on the field, you're able to activate your mini hand traps in hand to special summon enough monsters. Or you're able to just, like, normal summon a monster, special summon one of your other Rescue Ace monsters out of your hand, and then start your plays. The other thing that this archetype has going for it is that it has a very easy boss monster to summon, and then able to set 4 cards is actually very, very good. However, the archetype do have this particular problem that it is based a little bit of Hydrant. It is a little bit of an important card in a way, like I mentioned, not super important, but it is a card that really, really helps. So that's why it could be a little bit of a problem sometimes. Another thing that is a problem for this archetype from time to time is the fact that, again, it is board based. Yes, it is an advantage as well, but it's also a little bit of a disadvantage because well, if it's too board based, your opponent will be able to use some board breaking cards and essentially break your board. And sometimes the hand traps like effect that I also mentioned as an advantage are not as good as you might think they are. So the advantages and disadvantages of this deck are kind of like really intertwined with each other. So that's why this is a pretty hard section to explain. Also, another thing going on for it is that this archetype is really easy to use as an overall. It's kind of like very simple and very straightforward, so that's another really cool thing about this archetype as an overall. But now let's move on into cards that you can actually use in order to empower this archetype. Well, this particular archetype has pretty particular sub-archetypes, or should I say archetypes that you can use as the sub-archetype to support this archetype. And that is the Gizmek, the Machina, and the Therion. These particular 3 archetypes, I think, can be used as a very nice additional support. Specifically with Gizmek is the Gizmek Naganaki, the Sunriser Signaler. God, I hate these names. But the point is the one that special summon it, that basically tribute a machine monster whose attack is equal to his defense, and then special summon a machine monster whose attack is equal to his defense with a lower level than the attributed monster, is able to tribute itself and then special summon well, a Hydrant directly from your deck, which is really good. So it's giving you some particular plays with that. You can also play the other cards, but this is the main line that you want to play because it's another really nice normal summon that giving you an additional more plays. In the case of Machina, Machina can actually works really well with this archetype because there are a bunch of machines as well, and they kind of just sometimes have cards in the graveyard or cards that you don't mind having in the graveyard and discarding, and using the Machina is always just really good as an engine for machine decks as an overall, so there are some advantages there. And of course, the Therion engine with King Regulix for the machine route, and the Bowl for the warrior route, giving you additional maybe an interruption in case of Regulix because it works with the machines, and also in the case of Ball it can also help you break boards going second, so there is a little bit of a merit and advantage going there, so do count that as an option as well. And then for the spells that you can use 1-for-1 to see Hydrant, Power Rise Map to see Hydrant, and then Pot of Desires as well as Small World can be very nice consistency cards, giving you additional more ways to see things, as well as Reinforcement of the Army, because Reinforcement of the Army is a very good card to give you, to search for your warrior card, so that's pretty nice. And then the only extra deck monster I actually would recommend is IP Masquerena. You can also use Linkaribo for your Hydrant and stuff like that, but those are things that are a given, so I wouldn't really recommend them because people will just think about them immediately. But IPs might be a card that some people maybe overlook, although it's kind of weird if you do, because IP, if you have the right hand and sometimes the right cards like 2 monsters or 3 monsters, you're able to use 2 of them to make IP, leave the last one for your Rescue Ace traps, and then just link the IP and that monster after you're done using your traps to have a unicorn spin or something of that nature. So that's why IP is very good. Like I mentioned again, Linkaribo and things of that nature can also be really good, but it's not really the most important thing. Also, in case of Pot of Desires, you can also change it to Pot of Prosperity, as well as some other options. It's just thrown Pot of Desires, I don't know why specifically, because the first pot that comes to mind, but I think Pot of Prosperity is a little bit better for this archetype because you don't really use your extra decks anyway. So again, just switch that with Pot of Prosperity. I don't know why I mentioned Pot of Desire. But what other cards are actually good to use against this archetype? Well, we do have some particular other cards that are actually really good. Well, I would say that the archetype doesn't really have specific cards that are just absolutely amazing against it, in case of, like, not saying that there are not cards that are amazing against it, but like it's just more of categories of cards that are good against it. I would say 3 that are kind of like striking me that much that are also represent these categories are Lightning Storm, Infinite Permanence, and Ash Blossom. Basically, Lightning Storm is specific board-breaking cards, specifically ones that also deal with back row, because back row is the main thing in this archetype, and if you're able to deal sometimes with the back row, the deck kind of dead, even though it's accumulated a lot of advantage, because if you remove the entire back row, some of the cards don't really work. So yeah, that's actually really important. Then we have Infinite Permanence, because if you drop it on the right card, it's basically sometimes turned over and they're not able to do anything. And Ash Blossom, because this archetype search quite a bit, so that is also a very important thing for this archetype. But yeah, that's pretty much does it for the cards that are good against it, or should I say, you know, in general, cards. Now we can actually, yeah, talk about, what is it called? The end of the video, I guess. That's kind of how that called. I don't know why I kind of just said it like that, but the point is, now we can actually conclude the video with the cards as an overall and everything after seeing everything. I would say Rescue Ace, again, is a really cool archetype. It's a very unique style, although very simple to pilot. It's kind of have really cool and strong effects. The problem is that it feels like Konami kind of on purpose kind of just didn't really make them the most broken, so they wouldn't break the game, because if they did have like 1 or 2 additional really good cards for it, like, you know, going on for them for like their own individual effects and everything for all of their categories, they might actually have been a little bit broken. But one other thing is that Turbulence is really good, but it sets only 2 interruptions and 2 cards that are kind of, one of them maybe an interruption and the other one is just a recycler or a searcher, so it's not really the best thing in the world. It is kind of Turbulence, technically is a 1 card, 2 interruptions, interruption by itself, and then again, if you control a Hydrant, a 3rd interruption in the case of the spell and traps when it comes to rescue, I believe, so that's kind of 1 card for interruptions. But again, it's sometimes really just build around Turbulence, and that's why it is a little bit of a problem. So it's sometimes a little bit of an issue with that. It is a good going first archetype. It's also just have potential going second. It's a very grindy archetype, but like I said, the problem is that sometimes the pieces don't really fall together. I do think it's a good rogue deck. I'm not sure if it's the strongest one, but I do think it's the strongest archetype out of the 3 here, because Mechano, or whatever they're called, the ritual equip spell is definitely not really that good, and Purify, while it has some huge things going for it and some particular things going for it as well, it's not really that amazing. So I think out of the archetypes, it's the one that I'm mostly excited / hopeful about. I'm going to give this one 3.5 / hopeful 4 stars, because I do think it's going to be a decent tier 2 deck. I don't think it's going to be anything more than that, and it's not just going to break the game out of the water, but I still think it's going to be really cool. But that pretty much does it for the review itself as an overall. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something new. Again, I don't think Rescue Aces are just going to break the game, but I think they're just really cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about this archetype and if you're excited for it as I am. And I will see you in the next video for the next review, hopefully, that will come soon with Purity, which is the cute new archetype that's coming out of the set. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.